There you go. So things from my side. There's some interesting political developments in the AI world that I want to cover.
Mhm.
Um, there's Grok 4 coming out in about a 24-hour period. Um, I got AI streaming into our platform, which I swear was
Cool.
like drops of rain in the desert, man. I was like, thank goodness the rain has arrived. Um, so I just never want to leave it so long before being able to hook up something useful. It's just been too long without the crown jewel sitting there.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I got some stuff to cover off camera as well. But yeah, those are my topics for the day.
Okay. All right.
How about from you?
Nothing particular. The hopper continues to expand.
God damn it.
Um, but there's nothing new. Um, they're rolling forward quite nicely.
How sure are we that this thing meets the needs of the hopper? And how
Um,
do you know? Pardon me for
uh,
asking.
the characterized in a few ways. Most of the things in the hopper are to do with data processing.
So
And
the agentic systems, or even less, they're just pipeline processing,
um, some would benefit from agentic.
right?
Uh, well, I'll give you one example.
And
The
is
translation
it?
guy.
Yeah, I was just gonna think of that example. Is that an example of something that's like kind of skillful prompting? So it's like an agent that you can sort of basically a bot, doesn't even have to be an agent, that you can sort of teach and add to a knowledge base, and it applies the knowledge base rules when it's doing translations, and as you correct it the knowledge base updates.
Yes, that's part of it.
Well, this
The
is the issue I have with that. Not an issue, a observation. That pattern seems to be the pattern, because
it works for OSINT as well.
that's the
Um,
same pattern
yeah,
that runs the ambient attribution agent, the way that we last described it. Like
yeah,
that single simple pattern of like a knowledge base, a gatekeeper or a librarian, a filing system, an extractor, a compressor, that the thing that takes whatever happened and decides if the knowledge base needs to change, and then an executor which takes the knowledge base and does the work.
yeah,
That
yeah.
pattern, right,
Uh,
is like fucking everywhere.
it recurs again and again. So if
Yeah.
we're to look at the translation thing, what they're trying to do, their aim is to get higher quality for lower cost. By higher quality, they're looking at getting idioms into translation. They're looking for less clunky
Because that's an
translations.
interesting application, because it won't matter how good the AI gets, it will always be wrong without the idioms, right?
Right,
And that's what
right.
makes it super good.
But also there's a few interesting things because at the moment they're getting quite well in their eyes, and they're the experts. Poor results by chunking up. They're chunking up with like 20 paragraphs at a time, sticking that in, translating it, and so on. But what they're structuring it wrong in a number of ways. But one of the ways is
Can I
novels
get?
don't come in. Yeah, sorry.
I think I can see exactly how to do that. The same
Uh-huh.
way that you see codecs work, where it looks at a piece of code, it moves back to another thing, and does that. It's like a lens with a sliding dynamic cursor where it reads the text, takes a bit, hums and ahs about it, checks back with some other text, checks in the knowledge base, comes back, and it just keeps like
Right, right.
grinding and grinding over the whole workbook, but it's only ever translating a little bit at a time.
Well,
And it,
I'd double down on that because if you've got a repo of code, that repo has quite a large number of files. But you never see anyone just catching together all their text in one file. Go for it.
Correct. Additionally, it occurred to me that if the construction of the idioms is the differentiator between good quality and low quality, independent of the model, the AI quality, then we can also build an extracting tool that can take known good translations of books that are known to be well translated, that have been done by hand or whatever, and we can map out the idiomatic differences from one language to the next so that we can seed that base database with a lot of stuff right off the bat.
Right. Yes. Yes. And there's also meta layers. So, say instead of um, treating a novel as one big tome, if you were to cut it that you've got 12 characters, say, in a novel, and each of those characters have different characteristics. The idioms also change. If it was a detective story, for example, the broad with the scarlet dress and the detective would each have their own ways of expressing themselves versus the victim or the
Yeah,
perpetrator.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So it needs to be aware of the logical model or the
yeah,
world within the textbook so that it has consistency between entities. So it needs an entity extraction step where it's like, even if you're talking about a kayak or a murder weapon or a house, the entities are really the key to the language so that you
yes,
don't get generation differences when you're talking about the same thing throughout the book. and
yeah,
and that that would be done by this walking cursor where you're searching, moving, updating the entities, deciding whether it's the same entity or a different entity. And so actually the translation end result will have this knowledge base that it drew on of idioms, but also this like murder mystery map of entities and relationships between it that would have broken down the text. And that should be constant between languages because the things don't change, the
yeah,
relationships don't
yeah.
change, the
Precisely. It's a
expression of it.
pre-processing step, isn't it? It's a
Yeah, yeah,
pre-processing
yeah.
step
It's
to
like a
understand it.
decompilation. You're decompiling out of the idiomatic language that it was written in, decompiling down to entity relationships, and then recompiling back up whilst pulling across some of the stylistic nuance or stylistic differences in the text, so that some of that signature style comes across as well,
Yeah,
and the structure and the ordering and all that. But you can even start to play with the order because different languages have conceptual orders that don't make sense in the same order as it would in English versus Chinese. Like they wouldn't, or Russian, they wouldn't order things the same, and so you can also
yeah,
nuance that difference as well.
yeah. Yes, absolutely. And on order, there's also some interesting things like the narrator's voice. But
Yeah,
also, at any one point, what does that character or the narrator know? There's also this thing called the unreliable narrator.
right. And so you
Um,
yeah, so you got the narrator is the proofreader. So you'd set up an agent that's their purpose was to proofread it and do chronological checking, like check the introduction of new subjects and be like, that makes no sense because you added it in ahead of time. And so you'd basically have these like separate tools, separate agents that are reading the text and making modifications each time, and then like doing a new pass, doing a new pass, doing a new pass. And then you could also change the narrator's voice based on what you know is popular in the culture, because a certain type of voice in the UK might sound absolutely ridiculous in Zimbabwe, for example. But
yeah.
tell me about the narrator problem. that you would that I cut you off
So
from?
it's not a problem. The narrator is a character. The narrator being the person telling the story,
Yeah.
and but sometimes um, if you chunk it up into 20 paragraphs, the translation, the narrator translation, only knows about those 20 paragraphs.
Yeah, you blinded the bot, and because you can't expect the bot to do it whole context into whole context anyway. It needs to
Yeah,
grind. It needs a strategy in it. And that's what I'm starting to see in the platform here is that it's all well and good to have these really highly intelligent bots. Okay, it's all well and good to have all this available context that we can pull in. But no matter what you do, the result appears to need a strategy or a structure. And with some guidance from a human to pick a good strategy, and I'm not claiming that humans are the only ones who can make strategies, but the difference in performance of a good strategy and no strategy is vast. And
mm,
so it would appear to come down to strategies that you can quickly roll out, tweak, play with. How much background context? Like, we've only talked about context that I want to stuff in the chat, but there's also things like this distilled knowledge base of all the
yeah,
highly wrought out, squeezed out little bits of knowledge that have been hard won, hard reviewed, human curated. That stuff is actually the value because
yeah,
any model is going to fuck it up unless it's got that background base. And so the background base becomes where you put the meter or where you charge because it's like that is the value.
exactly. And some of the translations that they're getting really shit results on from just single shot chunking. Things like in the novel, one character might drop a hint, but they will drop a hint through saying something that kind of foreshadows something else happening. Use a
Mm,
specific word and so on. If that
mm.
word is translated wrong, you just lose that part.
You lost that whole thing, yeah. So
Um,
we can there will be layers upon layers upon layers and like nuance over nuance over nuance. So we'll need ways to rapidly capture and test strategies and do exception handling when the humans go through and screen it. But this feels like something that you could build up a very valuable base that,
yeah,
like, if you could get, near perfect first shot, and sure, it might have taken like 24 hours of grind, but, and it would never make the same mistake twice. That's a
yes.
valuable system.
And one of the key things that I think they probably need is you can't, even if you got a process, a pipeline, and churn out a novel,
Mm.
um, you really shouldn't trust that because some of the nuances might be too small for it to catch.
Okay,
Now,
so
running
what is the application of this? Like, uh, my next question is going to be. Oh, I'm really sorry. I can remember my next question. I cut you off.
I don't know, I was going to say throwing up red flags to humans,
Yeah,
saying we ran this on 3 models and the results were too diverse.
right. We couldn't get convergence on the reruns,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
and the score is vague. Like the knowledge base doesn't give us guidance.
It's too subtle, yeah. But it's that kind of subtlety indicator
Right.
reduces, the amount of work the translator editor needs to look at
Mm.
from the entire thing to maybe five
Right.
percent.
And then every time an editor corrects it, we would learn about that nuance. And we might not get it first go, but if we, is it ruminate on it? If we cause the
Yep.
bots to ruminate on these ones that seem similar, we'll eventually extract a rule. And my,
I would say it's a heuristic, but yeah, yeah, it's like, generally speaking, in this case, in this novel
Yeah, and you can
context.
do the
You should be
equivalent
there.
of deep research when you hit something that looks like that. You can use deep research to go through the knowledge base, link it back to the exact case in point, and look at what was chosen, and then compare a few of them and be like, I'm pretty sure that based on what I know, this is the choice to make.
Yeah.
So my
Uh,
question is that I can see a business model for that that involves um, an entity keeping that knowledge base and then also providing work for editors and selling the final translated product to the consumers or the publishers or whatever of it. And what's good about that is that you got a labor marketplace that's burstable and comes with the product, and then the actual value is all the nuances and the examples and the heuristics, the rules, plus the strategies that we found to win. Those need not be. Those could be held by an entity in the middle, and then usage of those things is purchased from many different publishers. Because why should one publisher hold all of that when it's generally useful across all publishers, and you're building up a valuable knowledge base that could be kept private and could that's actually the thing you need, is that internal knowledge base that's been wrung out of the
right.
usage and continues to be improved by every time an editor spots an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Precisely. And these are chunks that you could put onto the Dreamcatcher. If you've successfully built up a bunch of heuristics around Russian novels in the
Yeah,
19th
but
century.
we would need to keep those private at the start. So how would that model work? Like, I can't
Well,
imagine it working if those were open, because you'd just get no one would people would just copy it and run off.
we, you'd license them.
But people would copy them because to know them, we wouldn't know that someone was using that knowledge base to do
Um,
translations.
well, one way of doing that, I guess, is to give an endpoint where it's black
That's what it.
boxed.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. It needs to be a black box endpoint, because let's not forget that it would also be holding copyrighted material. And so you could argue that we can't actually make it public because the copyright holders don't want their work and their excerpts being made public too. And so without the example text, what's the point in having the heuristic? Like, you can't recreate it, you can't reanalyze it.
Yeah, true. There's a processing stroke creative step, you could argue, but then mm, uh, what you don't want to do is kill your translation business by nobody coming to you because they feel that their novel is being ripped.
Yeah,
Um,
so really, like, the translator business needs to, like, part of the deal with the publisher is the ability to hold the copyright material in a retrieval system for the purposes of translating. And as a result, um, the way that the reward system can work is that if you bring us a problem, a book to translate, and it has some problems that need solving, and you pay extra to solve those problems or whatever, then you can get royalties from whenever the heuristics that you caused to be found get used. You can receive your payout from those, perhaps.
yes,
But it
yes,
needs to
I
be an
agree.
endpoint. I'm pretty sure that's a very unique case, because it warrants privacy. It warrants taking it off chain.
In terms of the structure, then uh, seems pretty obvious. A NAP as a black boxed, untrusted endpoint where you can add in metering You can add
Yeah,
it in. Yeah,
yeah.
we'll
You
charge
p-
you
you
this
yeah, you pay to get
cost.
your translation, and then there's an interface, a set of frames where you can put in annotations of your own if you want to source your own labor force, or we can post jobs on a Dreamcatcher to get a labor force to come and in private on a case by case basis deal with the nuance.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah,
that's great value generation. That one, I love that one.
it's good, gnarly one, isn't it?
Mm.
And
Like that's
it's
meterable. You can put a lock on that and be like,
yeah. The reason I like this one is because I can't conceive of a way of doing it other than alternatively just hiring really quite skilled and expensive people.
what was
There's
their skill?
no
The
in
translation.
translation, but also I'm learning quite a lot about translation. Uh, the what appears to be is the translator really needs to also understand the society in
Yeah,
which the book was written
yeah,
and the society in which you're translating to.
yeah. So we would need to pay the people that do that bit, that provide new knowledge, novel knowledge about that every time, and we would need to pay for the tokens that were burned and pay the strategy generators that make new strategies that produce the outputs, and we would charge the publisher,
Yeah, yeah, precisely.
but the
Um,
knowledge base would stay closed.
the other thing that we've got quite a lot in the hopper of, it seems to be a recurring theme, interesting enough, is OSINT. And it seems to me, on many respects, OSINT is very similar to translation. It's like we've got this thing, this hunk of data. What does it mean? But by if you were to effectively interpret a piece of OSINT in abstract, it doesn't mean anything really.
Right.
Um,
So it's sort of like a deep research call, right? Like a
yeah,
highly specialized deep research run where it's grinding through everything it can get its hands on with a particular thesis in mind or a particular question, right?
yes, and also building up this store of heuristics about how do these things interact,
Mm.
what
So
weighting do you
that
give
would
it, and
again
so on.
be the entity map, the relationships and the entity mapping, sort of like the murder mystery thing with the red string on the board, right?
Right, yeah, it's one of those murder walls you see in
Yeah,
movies.
yeah, but it's walkable. Like it's too big to fit in context, but you can navigate it. And if the bot's allowed to just endlessly walk, it's got memory of where it went to, so it knows when it's going in loops. But it can correct. It can maintain the entity map with the concept of probabilities. So it's like here's a it doesn't know for sure because it can't prove, but it can say that each link has a range of probabilities that link to other things, and so you can kind of come back with probabilistic answers.
That's the really important thing about OSINT. So if you get in a piece of information, then you put them into buckets, right?
Yeah,
So this individual has generally been trustworthy. So you put it into that individual bucket.
right.
Maybe there's three or four individual buckets, but say some of them used mapping data, and it's like, oh, mapping data can be wrong, but it's generally right. Um, then you can have each of those buckets from the entities putting it in, saying, "I read this in the newspaper." It's like
Right.
probably low priority or low likelihood that it's going to be accurate, and the
Right. So
assessment of
right,
that.
right. So it's like again a bunch of strategies for how to score and process information that came from different channels. The
Yeah,
strategies get improved, trialed, chosen, invented. A curated ground truth knowledge base, which again is the same pattern as what we're talking about for
yeah,
the translation, and then an entity map where it's used the knowledge base to extract out entities and relationships from the untrusted information and assign a probabilistic entity mapping so that it can walk around and refine that as best it can and give you specific answers based on all the prior runs that have occurred and built out this map,
Yes,
right? So the
and
data structure looks the damn same.
it does, doesn't it? It's weird. It's pointing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And
So
previously, I was thinking about for Austin adding into the JSON some kind of weighting, but then I'm kind of drifting away from that idea uh, because what you've got is the feedback from the analyst um, in order to actually generate the previous threads through transclusion of, well, okay, you got that wrong, and now we've got a thread that the analyst has said, no, no, you're being stupid.
yeah, so you ruminate on that to cause the knowledge base to update,
Yeah,
or you create an anonymized problem that explains what went wrong and is like, we don't know how to fix this kind of drift
yeah,
in an agent run.
exactly. And after all, if you were to put in a probability into a JSON of one of these nuggets in a bucket, um, how do you calibrate? Um, you know, sure, you go from 0 to 99 on whether you're sure
I
or
think
not.
calibration's easy actually.
Yeah.
It need not be. It can just be relative. Like this one's stronger than this one. You know.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can also afford to shuffle it. So you're like, what if we were wrong? What if this one was more important than this one, even though we've appraised it differently? And so you can see what effect it has to reorder the priority of correctness. And so I do believe you could reduce down the conflicts and the ones that matter, which would be an even smaller subset. I think you could pretty quickly narrow those down. And that's really what an analyst should be looking at, I think,
Mm.
because I can imagine a platform that's fairly simple that consists of an analyst guiding these long horizon agent trajectories that are all every time they touch information it's growing the data lake, but it's also logarithmically growing the knowledge base with
Hmm.
distilled, annotated, reasoned over data, and it's always affecting the entity map, and then further you can have a higher level background process that's looking at all of these long horizon trajectories together and highlighting which ones are colliding nearby in entity space or vector space so that the analyst can be like, oh, this the guy 2 floors down, he's in this area and he's looking at these things, I should talk to him, and
Precisely. And I was running through, the London 7/7 bombings, and I was listening to a podcast, a really good one, done by a former MI5 and CIA agent. They were really good. And they were going through, well, what was known on the lead up to those bombings. And it turns out they had quite a lot of information, but there wasn't enough to trigger anything. And so
oh, and
there was
that's
some
a different kind of heuristic or stuck, right? You're like,
yeah,
we should have known. This is all we knew at the time. How can we recalibrate so that we would know next time?
exactly. And there was one screaming one where these guys were like hanging out with a bunch of other dudes. Those and the let's say Group One, which is the guys who carried out the bombings, weren't doing anything enough to actually, warrant, hey, we need to arrest these guys now. They were hanging out with Group Two, and Group Two did carry out quite a minor attack, and it wasn't reassessed that, well, hey, if these guys are tight, Group One's tight with Group Two, and Group Two's just done this thing. Group One has got all this, yeah, okay, suspicious, but nothing that we could actually do. Then suddenly you need to reassess each of these buckets of information. Like,
Yeah, so you
hey,
can have
these
like
guys were on holiday together.
you can have you can have avalanche recalculations where you're like, oh, we got some new information or some information that turned out to be wrong, and so now we need to rerun all of the
Yeah, exactly. It's
all
that
of the
background
rumination.
churn. So everything in the vector space, every time something changes, then
Mm.
give
Yeah,
pending
it should
probing
be a
burns,
very
just
rapid
do it.
spike in like
Yeah,
recalculation, and that's as fast as you can go, and that's why making that system's valuable, because anything less than that avalanche type of effect is sub performance.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I'm not quite precise enough yet, but from what I can see, and there's a bizarre connection. Translation seems to be connected in its architecture to OSINT.
Yeah, loosely. But I think there's also a range of other periphery services you can extract from that. Like, for example, reading a newspaper. Like, ideally, you'd want your newspaper to be the latest OSINT discoveries that have happened from a range of long running grinds
Yeah.
that are based on recent information, plus trying to uncover relationships in existing information, plus people having ideas and suggesting them. Because as a theorist, you could put forward an idea that could take many days for a long running agent to walk through and chase down to conclusion. Those would be interesting things to read
That's
about.
very interesting. Yeah, I always used to be really jealous of um, the whoever the sitting POTUS was. The fact that they got an intelligence briefing every morning of everything that's happened
All of us
across the.
should have that, and it should be about the things that we care about.
Wouldn't it be great?
Yeah.
Here's your
Furthermore,
morning briefing.
yeah, right. Furthermore, with the translation thing, you can also start to tap into multilingual information that is typically barred from these searches, because all that matters is the strategy. The extraction of the entity map can be language agnostic.
Yeah.
The knowledge base is language agnostic. So being able to take,
That's very interesting because a lot of the problems in Intel is in the translation piece of it.
yeah,
If
yeah,
someone in Afghanistan says, "Hey, Prime Minister, go stick your head in a pig," is that a good thing or
yeah.
a
So
bad
that
thing?
same translation nuance applies to interpreting OSINT during the trajectory,
Mm.
right?
Oh, I hadn't spotted that. That's
Because you're
really
like,
interesting.
it's subtle, but it actually
Yeah.
means this in this culture, in this region, at this time. So those are
Uh,
those are fun
hmm.
ones that have the same mechanics, right? And that all has the same mechanics as DAOs. Like a DAO that is chat based, where you're just chatting, and it's grinding over a base knowledge base to, you know, add new trusted information, and then building up an entity map about the awareness of the world around it, effectively, the things it knows about and their relationships and their probabilities. And then every time anyone says anything, it looks to the entity map and the knowledge base, or the morals, I guess, of the system before it decides what to do next, which may be inaction, but could be triggering some other things.
Hmm. I agree. It's interesting that really diverse problems seem to be pointing to the same solution.
It's
Um,
very strange, and what I note from that is that these problems are, in some application areas, showing that there's a private body of knowledge that can be very valuable. like the translation nuance thing,
Mm.
it's also showing that there are some shared problems that can be created, like a different strategy for how to deal with a particular nuance that's not been captured by the existing strategies. And so you get this endless cycle of nuance improvement coupled with model improvement. This strategy now works with this new model, these ones don't. And you start to see, like, it's not the knowledge base in applications like DAOs needs to be open. And but the knowledge base itself isn't the value. The strategy as to how the knowledge base gets improved and how the knowledge base is executed, that's the value. The strategies is the value. And again, in a DAO, you don't really want to keep the strategy secret. You can't really keep anything secret to get the value. The value is the action that the DAO chooses to take becomes valuable because it's the best action for a large number of people. So they are relieved, they keep putting funds in, they keep following instructions. So their value is extrinsic from the agentic system, but the translator has its value intrinsic to the agentic system. It's intrinsic in the knowledge base. The strategies can be generalized, but without the knowledge base, you can't really use the strategies all that much. And so also in a DAO, you don't really get that much paid work where a human expert comes in and tweaks up your knowledge base. But in the translation thing, you can pay money to a human to gain some knowledge that isn't in the model's inference or in the knowledge base already. And so now you paid for that human, the human created value, the value is now being leveraged to provide further value. So that's like intrinsic value to the data and extrinsic value to the data. And that appears to be the same strategy, the same problems, the same structure applied with different revenue models or extraction models.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I'll try to think
And
of
I would not be
Okay.
surprised if someone's already started on that translation problem, because that is golden.
For sure. And I haven't spent any time to find out because you can see what the solution is,
Mm,
which usually means someone else has also seen what the solution is. But we've got a bird in hand right now.
good in hand. It's pretty magic, actually, that you could, in the near future, generatively make a fairly detailed book without nearly as much effort as it used to take, and also have it be translated in all the world's major languages and make sense. That would
Okay.
typically be a monumental task.
Yeah. This is just, I'm not intending to do anything about this, but it was just a thought that occurred to me when I was looking at translations is that if ghostwriting, you
Yes,
just talk to someone and then they feather it all together, put it
yeah,
into the right voice, make
that's
sure,
what we want.
yeah. So if you could have an AI ghostwriter, I think that would be kind of cool because you could just like start talking to it. You wouldn't even have to form your thoughts.
Yeah, and you could chip
Um,
away at it over time.
yeah, and it would ask you questions and saying, "Hey, there's a gap in this. What were you
Mm.
doing back in July?" And it's like,
Yeah, yeah, it would talk back. It'd be like, I tried to do this thing and I missed it.
right. But ghostwriting seems to be the mirror inverse of translation because it's doing the same things. So it's looking at different story arcs. It's looking at how those fit together, making sure that the tone of voice is right in each one. It
Right, so
is,
in that case, the ghostwriter is an agent that is using the translator platform as a tool.
yeah,
And it's just simply, so this translation platform really could be called on arbitrarily big or small lumps of context.
yes, yeah, yeah,
But there's something else there. The detection of nuance is very important within the same language too, right?
Yeah.
And the detection of nuance is maybe not something that will be easily baked into a model because it can require a lot of context, particularly if you've got something like if I ingest all of your WhatsApp history and I gather metadata about how long between I send it and you read it, at what time in the day, the tone, the punctuation, the spacing, all those cues, they can extract out information about your internal mental model, and it can give me probability on what you're likely to do next or how you'll react to a certain situation. It could even help figure out what you really need, or what am I irritating you with that I'm not aware of, right? Like those
Mm.
types of things are the same problem as the translation problem. It's basically just very fine nuance from a vast array of examples honed
Yeah.
down on a very specific use case. And I feel like an AI model will never ever get that right because it can't possibly one shot it because the probabilities are too close together. Like nuance is a fine difference. A generalized model has to at some point lose or join probabilities that are close together.
I agree. And this is definitely a rabbit hole because I don't know if we've got bandwidth or the skill to deal with this, but I have been trying to mess with the voice bot, OpenAI voice bot. Um, for example, I was trying different Scottish terms. Well, actually, the same thing, and
Mm.
um, it was obvious why it wasn't going to work, but I just thought I'd do it for fun. So I did the record as opposed to the live thing, live transcription. So I would say, "Ah, away you go," and then the next one is "away you go," another one, "away you go." Now, to a Scottish ear, those three are completely different.
Correct. Correct.
Um, but it gets transcribed into text, and information is lost. Now,
This is a very valuable thing to go down because even to people who have, like, you've got 50 years of Scottish experience, you would still miss some things.
yeah,
And so a
sure,
machine that
sure,
can pick up more than you can is very valuable, right?
yeah.
Right? You're like, this person is feeling like this, and how often do you wish that you knew what someone else was going to do next, or how they were going to react to a situation, or what's the best angle to approach when you're broaching a difficult subject? What about timing? What time of day? How often do you need that?
Well, I actually more often than I might have thought previously because I was chatting with Jude about this, and I then realised that um, it was over dinner, and she wanted to talk about something else, and she lowered her voice half an octave in order to change the topic, even though she was still talking about the topic. It's like, okay, so that's really nice, and then we moved on to something else. Now, um, the change of tone, change of octave between away you go and away you go is sure that's something you'd have to train a model to do.
Yeah, but
But
the model would
context,
yeah, the
sorry, go on.
model would turn it into tokens, and those tokens, like text tokens, would have they'd be fitting in boxes, and so the tonal information is really just different tokens,
Sure, that's true.
right? But
What to
triggering on them is the important part.
Yeah.
And
What was wondering was after the conversation with Jude was there enough um, markers in the previous 2 minutes that meant the very last part of it should be interpreted differently.
Yeah,
So
it would have been.
probably, she was, you know, stuttering and starting and trying to change the subject, and I brought it back to the same subject. And
It
so,
doesn't sound like you.
even in text, is what I'm saying. Even without training for tonal quality, timbre, or pitch, um,
Timber.
there is timbre. I think it's timbre, isn't it? I don't know.
Okay,
I
but
don't care enough. But
yeah,
but
um,
the point for translation is context.
what I
The
want to get at, what I want to get at with this is that it feels like there's a thing that tier one will never do, because that nuance grind is a tier two thing. It's an orchestration. It's a repeated thing. I my theory is that it's impossible for a model to hit those kinds of answers correctly first shot. And yes, they could reason about them, but no matter what you do, there will always be some application or some theater of operation where the model wasn't trained on, didn't have enough data, may never have enough data, and the data could be incredibly private. And so, a strategy that can operate in those kinds of environments, that can produce good results, better results than a human, or better results than a tier one model just one shotting, those will always be valuable. And I'm starting to see glimpses of a space where you can build up these banks of knowledge early, and the knowledge bank becomes the value. Like, for example, um, toddler speech. If you had a use case where you could with very low error rate translate toddler speak, which a standard model will fail at abysmally, then if you had a consumer app that was being used in that arena, you would also have a large bank of toddler sounds coming up, which you could keep private for privacy reasons and blah, 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 blah. But the point is, now you've got more context than the other guys. Now, no one's going to train on that because that's your data, and that becomes valuable.
No, I agree. To unpack that a bit, tier one is largely about training. Sure, they're using behind the scenes agentic, fine. But they are trying to serve an audience of whatever it is, 8 billion people.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of gap that they have to miss because they just can't.
They can't possibly. How would you hone down? You got to serve equally to 8
Can I
billion
have
people.
another shot? Can I have another shot at what the theory is?
Yeah, go for it.
No matter how good Model 1 gets, a Tier 1 gets, a strategy and some private context can outperform it every time. Or, sorry, can not outperform it, can amplify it.
Yes, that's more
Right?
accurate. Because tier
Amplify
2
it.
requires tier 1.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
tier 1 should not specialize.
Well,
Since
it's not that it should not. All I'm saying is that no matter how much it tries to, Tier 2 will always be able to adapt and leverage it better,
Yes.
right? And that's really the crux of our argument or our bet or our gamble, is that you can always make the model better with a strategy and with some private context. Always.
Yeah.
And that's why you can always charge a premium above and beyond the model tokens.
Yes.
And that's safety. That's why we should push for this, because no matter how good Tier 1 gets, we'll always have a revenue stream.
Yeah. And tier 1, by definition, can't step into tier 2's territory. That's not to say the companies themselves actually create tier 2s. Sure.
Sure.
You can do that.
Sure.
But they're just going to be doing it like everyone else is doing. Tier 1 has to be the generalist.
Here we go. Tier 1. Anyway.
What's that? The largest city in the Americas.
Tijuana.
Juana?
Tier 1.
Never heard of it. Which is probably something to do with my ignorance of Mexico.
Fine. Okay,
It
so
looks
that's
lovely.
all right. So that's what we're seeing is we are making a strategy platform. There's some good applications for these strategies forming.
Mhm.
There's revenue streams in there that seem pretty low hanging. Push on towards agentic.
And also, interesting enough, recurring. Because, or this is a bit of an aside, but a lot of the people we're talking to at the moment are aware that AI is increasing in its capacity rapidly, and they don't have the skills in order to make use of that, but they do know that they're in a race with their competitors who may also be using AI.
Yeah.
And so recurring support seems to be a big deal.
Recurring support. So like the support model we've spoken about in Dreamcatcher, where it's like vibe coded apps, but long term sustained support patches.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So like
For example, new
spontaneous
model drop,
innovation.
do we use that sort of thing?
Sorry.
Does it break? New model drops, do we use it? Does it break anything?
Oh, like keeping up the certified upgrade path, the testing path.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Reliability, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Okay. All right. So keep going with agentic. Keep going with innovation networks for strategies, where you can come up with new strategies and apply them. We're seeing now the first monetary design that we've seen of keeping data private and leveraging that. So that starts to make
Yep.
sense in some areas.
Maybe a bit further down the road, but I think quite important is a map, not as an application, but as a pattern. I don't know where we store patterns.
You mean a strategy for solving a problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that's a combination of some prompting, some evals, and some knowledge base. I think, and I think there's also a nap that gets made that you can describe a strategy to, and it will refine it and work on it and test it for you. So you can have an idea for a strategy like you and I can, and we can probably talk about it in about 5 minutes. But to implement it often takes much longer and often goes undone. But it should not be too hard to at least make a rudimentary version that is easy to iterate upon verbally, because you see it and you're like, oh, what about this thing? What about that thing? And so the platform that presents problems but also presents tools that help you experiment on the answers quicker that's a good platform to be bonded to.
Agree. Is there anything that on the platform is substantially different between, if I were to characterize, and this may be wrong, characterize naps as tactics, how to get stuff done, whereas strategies is about how to use naps in order to get a kind of wider methodology.
I think that's still just a nap, because if you look at all of the npm packages, some of them have no dependencies, many of them have many dependencies, and in those dependencies further have dependencies, and so that's
isn't there
all that's going on there.
Isn't there a place for it? Because a strategy is a pattern. A pattern is you got lots of Lego bricks. You could try build high, build wide, whatever. Building a bridge, lots of strategies to do that.
I don't think there's a difference, but as we come to build it out, these types of things tend to shake out if they're there or not.
Well, my starter for 10 is, I think it's probably the strategy is described in a repo and you put it as part of the context. So it's like, consider this strategy while using this set of Lego bricks in order to build a bridge.
I'd view that as just another Lego brick.
Well, because it's a repo, it is another Lego brick, but it's kind of a Lego brick that tells you how to use the Lego bricks. It's the
Still a
instruction
Lego
manual.
brick. I don't think it matters to distinguish. It's going to be
No,
used the same either way.
yeah, I think it's. Let me
All right.
think about that. I
Okay.
don't think there's. I don't think there's. Well, I'm still trying fruitlessly to probe the substrate in order to see if we've missed anything. But strategies, it's just another equal.
Okay. So, can we move on?
Yes.
What is next? My turn?
Anything from? Yeah. As I was
Okay.
saying, I'm struggling a bit this morning, so
Fair enough.
I can respond.
Here is an
or
example
run off and hide.
of this is a nap that, can you read the text?
Yeah, I can.
Do you want it bigger?
Maybe one.
One
One
knock.
Yep.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So here is a nap that does chats. It provides the server-side functionality of new chat, delete chat, add message, where you add it to the chat, and the all-powerful generate text. And so, without further ado, this is it running. So what I've got running is, sorry, I said without further ado. This is basically further ado.
Yeah,
But
you're doing.
I am
There's more
doing further.
than you promised there.
But
yeah.
what I'm pleased with here is I made this harness. This harness comes out of the package that I've been publishing for Artifact. The harness is a way that a NAP author, which could be a human or a bot, can run under the hood. The harness runs a complete mini web server and connects the Artifact client up over that web server so that you can fully exercise the NAP that you're making in the environment that it's going to run in, so that you can be confident that it performs correctly. And I'm proud of that, because that's quite hard to recreate the infrastructure in a development sense. But here it is. So
I'd like to know more about that. I'm pretty sure I haven't understood it. It sounds connected to isolation.
it is related.
Runtime.
Yeah. We always struggled with how do you make a test harness to simulate what it means to make what we called covenants, smart contracts, NAPs, so that you can simulate what they'd be like on the server without all the heavy weight and distance or separation of the server itself. So a test environment that gives you guarantees about how your program performs without having to deploy servers. And so that's what this is doing. And so in this, I'll skip this one, this generate text example creates the harness. It uses override functions so that I can actually use the live code that's running in main, which means that I can get rapid feedback. Otherwise, if I didn't have that, I would have to publish the NAP, then run the NAP, find the error, fix the error, hope I fixed it right, publish it again, test it again. This section breaks that loop down to be in my local editor.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's where that speed up is, and this will eventually be on our platform, and then it's just running in one process rather than, it's instant feedback. So then
that's pretty neat, by the way.
It is neat. It took a long time, and that's what I guess I'm finally out of the desert, because
these features, I kept fucking up on these features in the past because they're really hard to get right. But this last design was another attempt at solving these problems, but some of the design work and the coding work of this latest design took much longer than I expected, and so I wasn't able to test these long-standing problems had been solved or not until now. Like now I'm starting to see that actually this model does allow solving the harness problem. I now have a harness. It was easy and it works great, but it was just took a really long time to get there. Whereas the other designs were quicker to get there, but the harness didn't work. So I don't know what the hell that means in the philosophy of the universe, but that's part of what the struggle was. This build was a long, dark run because it took a long time to get the bits in place to be able to start to do the features that matter, the features that you see in the light that are surfaced, all that. This build was a very long, dead reckoning type of run. And now it's starting to pop up out the top. So here's the test harness running. This is a fun one. Bind. Bind means that I took a schema, which is the definition of a nap, and I created functions that have the exact same signature as the nap. So when I'm developing, I can hit Control Space. These functions and definitions were defined in the nap schema, and now they're available to the programmer. And so I can even know if I misspelled the function name, for example. So that was part of the developer ergonomics that I wanted. It also means that when a bot is writing this code, the linter or the type checker can give you errors before you even run the code. You're like, no, that's not going to work because you typed the name wrong. And so the bot can correct these things rapidly, very rapidly, rather than having to wait until you run it and then trace down the problem.
Really neat.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah, that was because the whole thing we're trying to get to is a place where our platform can use the bots to generate naps and then fine tune them, sort of like Nuance. So again, that same strategy of like the nuance in the code, the nuance in what the instructions said versus what the code did, and why did the bot miss that time, you know? And we really want to build up that knowledge base of correlation between what I asked for, what you did wrong, and here's the heuristic that patches that. It's the same model over and over again. I don't want to tell this thing twice. I'd prefer to inherit what all my buddies schooled the bot on, or the faults that they highlighted with their action. I'd prefer to inherit that every morning. You know, I don't want to wait for a year until the knowledge cutoff of the bot. Like, I want this thing customized to me every prompt. Every time I interact with it, it should subtly update its model of me and what I want, and it should share that around my peers and figure out what we together prefer and want, so that there's just less and less effort required. It gets it right first time more and more and more, and it can do longer and longer trajectory runs, right? Yeah. And so the all of this work, like painful work, but it's starting to come together, and you're starting to get these like high velocity features. Like, I can tell you that you typed wrong, so fix it immediately to the bot, you know? And the idea being that you should be able to come in here on the platform and chat about a nap, and then have the bots go out and build it, and it get it pretty damn right with its first presentation back to you. It'll at least compile, it'll at least run. It might not do exactly what you meant, but that's cool. Sometimes you don't know what you meant until you see a strawman to attack. But the amount of effort it should take you to get a nap off the ground should be damn well minuscule. It should be practically, you just whispered it and it figured out that you could only have meant these three things. It built these three things. It checked around the net to see which of the three was maybe the best. It lined them up and was like, assess, please.
Oh, it comes back, yeah, for the nuance. It is the same as translation.
It's the same thing, right? And it's the
Yeah.
same model. It's this curated knowledge base layer and an executor along with Stux.
Yeah,
Right.
precisely. And the same goes with changing an existing as opposed to creating a new.
It should be the same, yeah. It's kind of meant to be the same. And then you've also got the same, I'm not sure exactly how it works in code, but there's the same entity mapping. So there are like tools that you can run that will give you a strong entity mapping. But it's more like there should be an object from the point of view of a human reading the code. What are the objects that I have in mind if I wrote the code? And how do those objects map back to the problem domain that I'm trying to work in? You know, like I really don't give a fuck about the internal structure of the program. I care how does it map to the real world thing I'm trying to model in the program, right?
Context. It's always context.
It's the same entity relationship mapping that we've just been talking about for translation.
Yeah.
It's about the knowledge base applied, or the universe around why the program exists, which I feel is horribly lacking from the bots at the moment.
Well, that's what I mean by context. It's like the difference.
Yeah,
semantically
right.
of
But
a-
when you say context, I think what's happened just tonight is we've moved on beyond context to actually get into segments or subsections of what context actually means, because
yeah.
know,
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
now
It's
we've
being a bit-
separated
being a
it
bit lazy there.
into
Yeah.
fairly, well, I mean, it was only tonight that we really realized that context means three different things. It means the curated knowledge base of heuristics. It means the entity relationship model, which is probabilistic, fuzzy, theoretical, and which is like a graph. And then it also means the unprocessed, untrusted data as well. And those are three different kinds or segments or separations, separate kinds of context. And so when we say context, we mean one or some of those specific things.
Yes. Yeah, precisely.
And the relationship between my context and your context is kind of where the social aspect comes from, because that knowledge base, for if you and I are talking about making a book translation service, our knowledge base of context, sure, it inherits something from like the program making context, the something context, and then there's our venture that has this dictionary, this knowledge base. That's like the context gets more and more specific. And so if you and I are working on a project, we should share the context, because the knowledge base context becomes now the source code. The entity relationship map becomes the new working directory of Git. It's not source code anymore. No one gives a fluff about source code. It's the context that makes the
source code is
code.
still in there, but that's just one of those three.
It's almost like this is even higher level than, so you got assembly, then you got like higher level object oriented, and now one level higher is context programming or vibe coding or whatever the hell you want to call it. But it's above the code.
Yeah. It's inevitable that someone's going to put on LinkedIn context engineer as their job title.
Well, we can go shoot them down and be like, there's many kinds of context. What the hell are you talking about? And so the social aspect is our sharing of those context components and the subsets within them. Like I want to share some of my knowledge base with you on some related projects. I want to keep others private. All those different things.
You know what it reminds me of? Remember, through the years, we've had sessions in order to get back in sync. There's
Yep.
something here about in sync being equated to having the same context
That
as
is
described
exactly
previously.
what in sync means. Yeah. And it means us syncing on our entity relationship
Yep.
database, but most of the time for us, because our work has been in the theoretical, it's been mostly syncing around the knowledge base.
Yeah, knowledge base, the ERM, and um, also the current context in which we're talking.
The current subset of each of those context kinds.
Sure. So if we're talking about something, I mean, the knowledge base can be quite large. Entity relationship is hugely important because you can't translate. Um, I call it the dull layer of data, but by which I mean, the data doesn't say anything other than, hey, I'm data. Entity relationship starts to weave in that data, but then the topic is really interesting. It's like, what are we actually trying to get in sync on? Is it everything? Is it something? Is it this part? And what does that mean? What does that ripple down to? It's exactly what we've been doing with every now and again when we have these.
It's
When we
just
get
how
in sync,
knowledge
we
goes.
talk
Yeah.
about,
It's
yeah,
how it's an that all knowledge goes that way, and all that we're really capturing with this knowledge base and ERM is that's just how knowledge is, and that's how
yeah,
you work with knowledge, and there's no getting around that. And the more explicitly that's captured, the better. The more we make tools that can surface that and provide nifty, elegant ways to control, manipulate, and modify how that works, the better. An OS and an OSINT platform that was like designed on these principles to expand the knowledge base, to
hmm
test and thicken the ERM, to n- notify the social aspects when long running agent trajectories are crossing paths, and different analysts should be made aware to look at the bigger picture of what do all these agent trajectories mean from a distance, like all that kind of awareness. We need to make those kinds of tools.
No, I agree. No counter argument. Just ruling agreement.
All right, shall I show you the thing running?
Can I just say I'm
Sure.
struggling a bit
For
due to
nature. Yep.
aforementioned.
Yep. Okay,
Thing.
bud. What do you need?
Not sure.
Okay.
Probably get through your list as quickly as possible.
Just hurry up. Yeah. Okay. So here then is again, each one of these lines took a hideous amount of work. So harness, great. Artifact, this gives you the access to the platform. Bind turns the NAP into type checked functions that then call the server mocked by this harness. New chat is the function represented inside of the NAP. Add message. I had to do a bit of dicking around to pick a message format so that we could support group chat and not get confused and not have issues with people's clocks being out and their message order get screwed up. So that's all good. Used interestingly a bit of a bastardized form of a Lamport clock for that.
I don't know what a Lamport clock is. But
it's a
probably
clock
good
that
to know.
it's a clock that deals in order between multiple parties as opposed to necessarily time. And then this one line probably sums up the bane of my life ever. Stream. Artifact and blockchains were always request response. Put something in, get something back. What if I want to put something in and get a range of things back, a sequence, a stream? That was the biggest change in this latest architecture for Artifact. It supported streaming. Streaming is what's required for elegant, highly efficient, responsive interactions between programs and programs, people and programs, agents and programs. This is that piece working. This test calls the AI generation on the server and gets back a stream of results. I will show it to you now. It's gonna run a bit fast, so I'll Oh, I was able to call O3 Pro in this model this afternoon too. So we got
Cool.
all the
Oh,
people,
nice.
all the fucking gods of the pantheon are available to us. All right.
Excellent.
So what's happened here? Just to skim that up. This called O4 Mini.
Okay.
It was in chats. This was the message ID. You may be familiar with that sort of number in the user interface.
Yeah.
It then streamed back the reasoning coming in from O4 Mini. So if you imagine this text stream being shown on screen in the browser, it's nice and fluid, responsive. You're seeing activity, tokens are burning in,
Yeah.
and then it eventually is like, okay, I got something to say now. Now the text starts streaming in. It's coming in pretty rapidly, but streaming makes it feel alive. I cannot live without streaming. It drives me mad to sit there and be like,
Yeah, because you don't know whether it's
Yeah.
crash or what.
yeah. Then it finishes its text generation, and then we get this key data structure which we need for billing. Input tokens, output
Ah,
tokens,
I've just told
reasoning
you a bunch of
tokens.
things, and here's how much effort. it
Here's
takes.
much it costs, right?
yeah.
Reasoning tokens, 512, total tokens. So then I'll take this stream. You just saw it in the browser. I will now tell you how much that cost you in terms of tokens and dollars and time. Additional information that I very helpfully get back because of this, the way that this AI SDK works. This is all the same data, just
yeah.
it's the same stuff
instead of
again.
Giving it
yeah.
word by word.
But where it gets good, here you get all the parameters of the model that were called. So like the temperature. Oh, sorry, that's not actually showing it. My bad. This is an interesting header here. Processing milliseconds. So how many milliseconds it took OpenAI to process the thing. This is using the new responses API. So I didn't really have to do anything much. This SDK wrapped all that for me. Yeah, that's it, really.
That's really cool.
Yeah, what's even cooler, though, is that I can, with this exact same interface, I can handle, like, all the models, like Grok 4, Claude, Claude Sonnet, Claude Opus, Gemini, all the different versions, all of these things. Because of this one SDK, it's trivial to just, all I gotta do is change the config, and it's a standardized, what I've done is I've made a standardized config across all the models, and so I can very easily allow us access to any model anytime, and they update it pretty quickly. As like, for example, I was able to call O3 Pro here. It cost me 7 cents, which I ain't happy about, but whatever.
Right.
And so now we have actual AI on the platform, and it's starting to feel like the rain just started to fall. Like, it's rudimentary, but that's AI running on a blockchain and streaming back the results as it does it, so that your user interface, your experience doesn't suck. Then you can add all the context of the repos and the files and all that. You can then add the context of the chats themselves into the context of the model processing it. We can make naps that can just run multiple model calls concurrently. You know, like, why not ask Claude, O3, Gemini, the whole lot all at once, bring it back, look at it again, decide to run again, pick one, do, you know, like all these strategies now can start to be composed for us.
That's brilliant.
I know, I'm so tired, but it would appear this is like the puncture through the barrier.
I wonder if is this unitary, as in everything in this frame that you're on at the moment?
Yeah.
Is I was thinking about streaming. Is this all
Deterministic?
no, not deterministic. Is it dumped in one chunk, or do you get this?
Oh, I'll run it again. I'll show you. It comes in as a stream. Like I'll pick a slower model so it's more obvious for you.
Well, there's no need to spend a few more cents. My question is, I wonder if there's a way to interrupt if it starts to go off piste.
In this particular thing, as a human, I'm not sure you'd know fast enough, but we could make it so that if it was a multi-step, if it was a long-running trajectory, we can make it so you can interject and you can like run back,
Right.
tweak it.
On the human scale, if you're just in the browser with O3, whatever, on deep research, you've got the stop button.
Yeah,
and you
we can do that. This has that too. So all that stuff is with us. So you can stop it. But what I'm getting at is that we are, as an agentic platform, trying to get away from the fact that like each of these turns of the model should be so quick that you probably can't stop it in time. Like I'll give you the stop button just because it's easy, but the thing you want to stop is the world is about now these long horizon runs, and you definitely want to be able to stop those. But more importantly, you want to be able to steer them or go back a few steps, and that's what this that's what the structure we are striving for will give you.
Yeah, I agree, but maybe I haven't worded that correctly. I'm not expecting the human to do the stopping.
The bot, yeah, but the bot. So what you're witnessing now is one turn. So a bot would not feasibly be able to interrupt one turn. The pattern would go, the turn would finish, and then the bot would assess if it needs to roll back or change course.
Right, gotcha.
So this is the speed of O3 running, just for reference. Excuse me.
Oh, flashing cursor. Flashy away.
See, so it's a lot
here you
more,
go,
right? That's O3 speed in reasoning. So as a human, you could probably stop that, but more to the point, you might as well not. But that's just one turn, right? And so when you want to do checks and interruptions, you wait for the turn to finish, and then you take some corrective action, I think is a clean way. Have I got enough time to jump onto some other ancillary items that I...
Yeah, still hanging in.
Okay.
Apologies for...
Do you want to go? Like, do you want to go now? Or go?
No, well, I might, but not yet.
Okay. I found that for WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram, there are actually libraries out there that give a very good recreation of what you use when you use like the clients for those apps. Like, you know how you got WhatsApp Web or the WhatsApp app that runs on your laptop. We can make that and you can scan the barcode to let you into that, and then we can hook that up to agents on the platform. We can do that with Signal, where the Signal bot acts like you, sees what you see, and we can do that with Telegram. And so you can join group chats, and it can see. There's some restrictions on previous history, but we can haul that in from your backups. But you can see the group chat, and you can insert that into the file system and add it as context to bot operations. And I think that's a small effort job. I think that's about like a week's worth of dicking around. You'd probably be up and running within half a day, and the rest would just be like tweaks and fixes and nuance. But at that point, now on our platform, we can offer you, it can be you as WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
And it can figure out stuff for you, and it can remind you, and it can manage calendars and coordinate, project manage.
That's really useful. I'm so sorry, mate. I'm going
That's
to
all
have
right.
to punch.
No
I'm
worries,
gonna have
buddy.
to punch.
No
Yeah.
worries. Good luck. I'll see you next time.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. See you Friday.
Gotta go. Yeah, see you there.